So what's happening in Australia? Where are you guys at? I forget.
We're in Mullumbimby at the moment.
Mullumbimby. Mullumbimby. That's in New South Wales.
It is northern New South Wales.
That's near. That's Mullumbimby. That's near. God, I can't even think. What's going on with our brains? I can see their faces. There, I love them to death. I can't remember what the hell. Oh, Kirsty and James Greenshields.
Ah, you don't know these people
I
yet?
think they live. I think that's the right word. I know y'all have a lot of strange words over there, Aboriginal, but I'm
Yep.
pretty sure they live near Mulbimby or
Cool.
something like that. So we got 14 people in the house. It's going to take another minute or so, but man, what's going on? What's happening?
We're just chilling, being in the moment, sitting by the river here, the Brunswick Heads River.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, we just attended an amazing festival this weekend in Bangalore called the Starlight Festival, which was really amazing. That was beautiful.
Really? How
Yeah.
was it? How was it going to a festival with all the restrictions that they have in New South Wales?
Well, it was interesting because I think we're just kind of living with everything,
Hmm.
living with COVID, so to speak. So, there were guidelines for, what was being asked of people. But I mean, for me, it was just really nice to be in community and be at events and be in spaces. And I gave a talk on cosmic numerology on Saturday, and
Yeah.
it was just lovely to be talking to humans again in the community and not necessarily just having a conversation with a device. It was
Right. Was there a lot of people there?
yeah, there really were. Yeah, it was yeah, really good attendance. Yeah, and
Well,
lots of beautiful sound bars with, kind of probably 50, 60, 70 people in a room at a time, which was beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of discussion about the restrictions and such, or was everybody just working around it and just
Just
enjoying the?
zero. It was just, this is how it is. And yeah, it was just, I think the focus was really on enjoying the weekend and, connecting and receiving and sharing, and
Yeah,
yeah, it was beautiful.
yeah. Speaking of speaking of that, Mrs. Cosmic Astrologer and partner, um, seems like in the middle of October the gauntlet came down, and sometime toward the end of October, it seemed like a totally new reality.
Yeah.
And it seems like the same type of cycle. November, December, and now January, particularly revolving around the 10th, 11th, 12th, 2021, and 22 of those months. I know that Morgan and I went through a lot, all very good. I mean, obviously there was times of um, not being in alignment, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, it's just the way it is. I mean, but coming out of it and expanding again. Did you guys go through that? Have you gone through
Yeah.
that in the last 90 days? Yeah. What was
Yep.
that like?
Yeah. It was really intense. I mean, the way that I understand it is there was a massive, massive amount of solar activity that was happening mid October, and a lot of us got affected by all of this plasma and all of this solar energy that was coming from the sun, from the solar flares and the CMEs. There's a lot of aurora activity, and as we know, when there's a lot of light coming towards the Earth, or there's things happening in the cosmos or nearby us in our solar system, all that light coming to Earth is going to displace an equal and opposite amount of darkness or shadow. And so we really started to feel it. We were living together in the van in Mullum, in a different campsite to the one we're in. And we actually both descended into probably the darkest, shadowiest place that both of us had been in together
Wow.
throughout the whole of our journey. And we very nearly didn't make it through
Yeah.
together.
Yeah.
um, I was doing my best to, I kind of moved through it and processed it as quickly as possible, and then was just doing my best to hold Jarrod in a place and space of unconditional love so that our egos didn't destroy the relationship. And then Jarrod, and I'm sure he can share a bit about his experience. He then just moved into a pretty intense, extended dark night of the soul, pretty much throughout most of November and December.
Mm,
And then we experienced a pretty big shift right at the end of the year, and then
yeah.
moving into 2022. And we can share a bit today about just why even now is important for us from an anniversary perspective. But I guess I'll just
Oh, this
let you.
is your anniversary, isn't it? Today
Yeah, from when it's our first contact anniversary. We made first human
at
contact
Uluru.
together at Uluru. Yeah,
Yeah, I remember
yeah,
you telling me about it. So you guys went through a really warm and cozy space where you're living in a van,
yeah. Which
which
brings
probably
up all
just
your stuff.
I call it
yeah.
the pressure cooker. It's when you live in a confined space with someone, there's not a lot of retreat space, especially with the weather we've had.
Rain,
So
lots of
there's
rain.
no real like sanctuary, sacred place to retreat to. So um, as you know, like the twin flame kind of mirroring each other's stuff. We had some very testing times, and it feels like we've been massively initiated into what's next. It feels like we've sort of come out the other side of that a lot closer for it. We survived 2021. It feels like now it's time to thrive. It feels like there's this new energy where we actually come closer together. We're not in separation anymore. The ego's copped so much of a bashing over the last 3 months, especially for me. Like, touch on that dark night of the soul. Like, I was in just such separation, and I'm usually really positive. I'm a really positive, higher perspective kind of guy, and for the first part of the year, I felt like I was the anchor point holding that higher perspective for our relationship. And yeah, it was my turn to be on the other side of the separation, and I went through all sorts of spaces, confusion about purpose, and
Yeah.
and I sort of found myself just spiritually exhausted, also from the path of 2021. It's just like I said, it's been a pressure cooker, and it's just been this constant asking of showing up. And it was like I kind of went through these phases where my inner child, through to my inner teen, through to my 20-year-old version of myself, were all in rebellion against this expansion, and I guess the medicine for me was to just honor where they were at, each version of myself, and really just not force or push myself out of those spaces. And I'm super grateful that Katharine had the awareness to and the ability to hold me in that. It was it was very dark, and it was like one moment I just come out of it. It took a lot of disconnecting from all spiritual aspects. Like, I disconnected my social media. I stepped right away from my platforms. I wasn't in service. I wasn't doing any of my energy work. It was just pulling all my energy in because I realized it's been out for so long, being in service to this planet and everyone I meet. I'm just always trying to, help and save. And so there was a lot of that sort of um,
Chiron.
Chiron energy sort of playing out as well. So yeah, I watched about 30, I'm going to say 30 movies on Netflix, and just pulled all my energy in, and not to spiritually bypass anything. It was actually, that's what I needed, to just disconnect from
Just let it.
always thinking,
Yeah.
always
Just let it.
going inward.
Yeah. Just let it happen. Just let it permeate through you. You said
Yeah.
spiritually exhausted. I mean, when is that going to stop? Do we have any idea, astrologer?
Good question. Well, I'm more on the numerology front actually, but with from an astrological perspective, there's always shifts, kind of happening. We just had a big conjunction this weekend, which was with Sun and Venus, which is
Mm,
a very positive one for love and for relationships. So anyone watching who's in a relationship who might have felt more of a closeness happening, even just energetically. That conjunction happened, and that's going to be paving the way for the next 9 months. And that happened based on true lifetime sky in Sagittarius, and Sagittarius is about expansion and travel, and like higher education, studying, learning, shifting and changing our beliefs. But from a numerological perspective, we've actually moved out of 2021, which was a 5 universal year.
Right.
And the shadow of the 5 is chaos. And like, you know, it's a very unpredictable energy and frequency. It's very spontaneous, but it's also the frequency of non-attachment. So it's not a relationship's best friend unless you're practicing polyamory or something like that, because the 4 frequency is all about commitment and is all about connectedness and is about being grounded. And that was the 2020 frequency, and that was why, you know, a lot of us were locked down and a lot of people were grounded, and that was even challenging for some people in relationships, I know. Whereas this year, 2022, is a 6 year. It's a 6 universal year, and the 6 frequency is the frequency of the home, family, children, community, ceremony, plants, using plants from a medicinal perspective to take care of our bodies. And it's a frequency associated with health and well-being. So, and it's a frequency associated with like physical touch, hugs, cuddles, massage. And it's a very kind of nurturing, nourishing energy. So it's almost like numerologically 2022 is like a big squishy hug. Very, very different to the 5 energy of 2021. And that 5 energy will still be overlapping for the first 6 months of this year.
Right.
But the 6 is going to be stronger.
Yeah.
So just from the chaos energy of the 5, that will still be potentially like playing out, but it's not going to be as front and center. And it will just be inviting us to kind of go with the flow even more, but with more of a focus on the 6 energy.
So what you're saying is the 5 and the 6 are kind of mixed the first half of the year. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
And you mentioned Venus, and I have a reason I'm asking, but I didn't know that Venus was in conjunction with the moon. Is that right?
With the sun.
With the sun.
Yeah.
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 Which even makes more sense. But like this whole thing, I don't even know how to explain this, but like this thing that's come in, which has to do with Venus, almost like Venus, of course, obviously feminine, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that Venus, almost like a higher aspect of Earth. Like I don't know why I'm even talking about this, but it's just some stuff that came in last night. Had to do with the reemergence of Venus, or so therefore the feminine.
Yeah.
Uh, that's something to do with that. I don't know if you knew
Yeah.
anything about that. I know that that last time you were on together, that we talked a bit about how you came together. I don't know that everybody was here when that happened. I know you met 2 years ago today at Uluru, but can you just kind of cover that? How you met? Did you know? Was it instant? Who busted the move and all that stuff?
Yeah. So I'll start, and I'll just pass the talking stick. So the way it came about was, I had written a post around, I think it was about the 21st of October 2019. So it was very close to the rock climb at Uluru. So the rock climb was closed on the 26th of October 2019. And that was massive in the Australian timeline or Australian history now, because custodianship had been handed to the original Indigenous custodians of the land like 35 years prior. But people were still allowed to climb on the rock. And, you know, for the Anangu people, who are the local custodians of Uluru, that's their church, that's their sacred space, that's their sacred temple. So they've been campaigning for many decades to get that closed. And around that time, I'd been invited by Auntie Nellie who's one of our elders and a very special elder here. She's based in the Central Desert, to sing Kinnie, there. And I think I sang that the last time we
Yeah, I
interviewed.
remember. Yeah.
But I still had some things that I needed to take care of in the UK, and some things I needed to, I just needed to be there for my family. But the funny thing was, I didn't know this at the time, but Jarrod was visiting Uluru for the first time just before that ceremony happened. So our paths were already starting to nearly cross back then, without our humans knowing. I had known for a long time that I needed to go to Uluru, but I was waiting for an invite from an original Indigenous elder. I wasn't going to go until I had that invite and a significant and important ceremony to attend. So I'd read these two books by an incredible man called Robert Kuhn, one called Earth Chakras and the other one called The Rainbow Serpent and the Holy Grail. And he writes about something called the interrupted ceremony in those books, which was a ceremony that was being held at Uluru a long time ago, like probably tens of thousands of years ago, that was interrupted. And the ceremony involved a baby eagle, or the totem of a baby eagle, and there were two dingoes that came from outside of the area, from outside tribes, and they killed the baby eagle. So this was what, in the story, this was what happened.
This was also the first time killing was introduced on this planet.
Earth.
Yeah.
The notion of like interference with a life, rather than natural death. It was, the first time that, killing with an intent to kill someone or to end a life, according to this story, was first introduced. So there were many of us that knew about this prophecy of the completion of the interrupted ceremony that would happen on the Saturn-Pluto conjunction on the 12th of January 2020. So it had been prophesized and spoken about for a long time. Now, these planets don't come together very often as viewed from Earth, because they have very, very, very long journeys around the sun.
Right.
So Pluto's the furthest from the sun, and it takes the longest amount of time. And then Saturn's, is again one of the outer planets. So when Saturn and Pluto come together, it's normally like only every 35, 40 years. Like they don't come together very often, but when they come together, it's very powerful, because Saturn is a very masculine energy. It's a fatherly energy, and it's about structure, amongst many other things. And Pluto, they call it the cosmic grim reaper. So Pluto clears stuff out. It destroys things, and it is associated with death. And so for me, from where I, witness and observe things on Earth, in conjunction with the stars, that conjunction that happened on the 12th of January 2020 actually paved the way for everything that we've been experiencing, especially in the last couple of years.
No, it's right in line with the whole COVID thing. Really.
100%. And when you look back at the other times when Saturn and Pluto have conjunct, there has been massive wars, there have been world wars, there have been plagues, there have been things that have wiped out a lot of people on the planet.
Wow.
So going to Uluru, I didn't actually know the extent to which this conjunction would affect Earth, because I didn't know then what I know now. But what I did do was I shared a post about the significance of, coming together. And Robert Kuhn wrote about, the importance of being at Uluru. So Uluru is acknowledged by many people, not all, but many, to be the solar plexus chakra of the planet. And it's a place where many people acknowledge the rainbow serpent, which is a very powerful song line, ley line, energy line, which is connected to the divine feminine. There's the feathered plumed serpent, which is connected to the masculine, the rainbow serpent that's connected to the feminine. Many people say that it comes out of the earth at Uluru, and there's a a resting place for it, and there's a water hole where it comes out, and there's a cave that it's connected to. And so I've been working with the song line that connects Glastonbury and Glastonbury Tor and the Chalice Well, which is acknowledged to be the heart and the third eye chakra of the planet, with Uluru. And I've been working with that song line for many years. So I was doing a lot of work in Glastonbury in 2019 before I even came to Uluru for the conjunction. But anyway, I put this post out. I didn't even know, but Jarrod saw the post somehow, and in reading the post knew that he needed to be at Uluru for the 12th of January. So yeah.
So there's the connection. So you guys were both on sometime, not at the same time, but October, what it would have been, 2019, and then you write the post. He hears the calling, so to speak, and then it's 2 years ago tomorrow. You actually physically
today for us, tomorrow for you. It's the 11th for us today.
Oh, the 11th. Okay, because you had said the 12th. I wasn't clear.
Yeah, we met on the 11th, and the conjunction was on the 12th.
Oh, okay. So what happened when you met? I mean, did you just like walk in a room and you're both looking at each other, going, "What the hell's going on?"
No. So I was in South Australia, and I drove 2 days. I was guided to take another brother with me, and so we journeyed for 2 days to be there for the 11th, the evening before. And when we arrived about 100k outside of Uluru, I've got these oracle deck cards called the Earth Warriors. Really powerful deck, and they were very they were very they were very powerful for my journey at that time. And I wasn't even aware that there was even such a card in this deck, but I was guided to pull over, and me and my brother, we sat, and this card come through, and it was the Kinnie card. And you can't write this stuff, like literally. I wasn't even familiar with Kinnie, the principles of Kinnie at this stage. So
let me see. Kinnie. Wow, those are pretty awesome. Those cards.
Yeah.
What does that say underneath it? What does it say?
It says, "In each other we find ourselves."
So that set the table for you to pull into Uluru 100 kilometers later. When did you see this mirror of you? When did you see her? Or who saw who first?
Yeah, well, Katharine was sitting in a circle with beautiful sisters, with an elder, Auntie Nellie, and I just felt very strongly to just go up and introduce myself to, I was wanting to know who Katharine was, who put the call out. So I asked the lady, and she pointed in the direction, and I just waited for my moment, and I just walked up and asked, and I think you were saying I was the first person that's ever asked you about Kinnie.
You wanted to know the story of the song, because the whole reason that I was there was to sing Kinnie. Nellie had invited me to sing Kinnie at the closing of the Walking on the Rock ceremony, and I wasn't able to. But the whole reason I was there to just sit with Nellie and sing Kinnie, because Kinnie is the teachings and the philosophy that her cousin, Uncle Bob Randall, but by skin law, she refers to him as her brother, because they have, their blood relations, but they have their skin law relations as well. And you can even not be blood related to someone, and they'll refer to you as a family member, but he's not on the planet anymore. He transitioned about 6 years ago, I think. But I think I told you the last time you interviewed me, actually, I was telling you the story of Kinnie and how the song had come to me. And I received that song in December 2018. And I'd been working with Nellie over the phone from the UK. And she just kept saying, when you coming, when you coming, when you coming to Uluru? And I said, well, I'm going to come in January, Nelly, I'll be there. But yeah, Jarrod was the first person who had asked me to tell the story of Kinnie and how that song had come about. And he was super excited.
That
So
sounds like the Ascension's greatest pickup line, if you ask me. You must have thought something like, "Who is this guy?" When did you guys figure out something was going on between you?
well, here's the really funny thing. So we had this connection, and for me, Jarrod was just any other person that I'd met, really. There wasn't anything particularly special other than the fact that he was tuned into Kinnie. Like he was tuned in to that. And
So
so that
you couldn't see him. Could you see her? Did you?
No, not at all. Like
Okay,
we
so
we
it was a mutual. Okay.
yeah,
yeah, we held ceremony like the next night for the conjunction, and in that space there was kind of a some shadow come through, and there was literally a metaphorical, like two dingoes attacking the eagle. I
Oh
witnessed it.
wow.
There was two guys, one from Israel and one from America,
yeah,
who completely out of line and out of touch just attacked Katharine
in the ceremony.
In this ceremony. Like, we're supposed to be creating unity and singing this beautiful song to come together, and this the two dingoes were present, and
They
so
were the dingoes.
I intervened.
Did you
I
have to
felt
whoop
like,
their ass? I'm just curious. Did you have to?
old version of me was like, I'm trying to stay love and light right now, but
Right.
there was a part of me was just like, this needs to be addressed. So yeah, we all sort of figured it out. It wasn't like we were all perfect human beings in that moment. We figured it out and we finished it, and
we hugged it out by the end of the evening. It was all perfect. I knew what was happening.
But there was just that shadow coming through, and we walked away from that that gathering, that ceremony, as friends. But yeah, we sort of stayed in contact.
There was no point in time where you just glanced over at her and go, "Wow, check out the legs on that lady."
No.
No, it was strictly, that was just.
It was actually like work. Like, we were there to do work.
Yeah.
It
was like secondary almost. Like, you were there for a primary purpose, was what you described. So and I remember this from talking to you before. You went to Uluru, you went your own ways, and then something happened to bring y'all back together.
Yeah, well, for me, what was also very significant was the fact that Jarrod, when he sat even with us on the 12th, so I was sat next to Nelly, and we were doing a Facebook Live, and she was talking about her vision for New Way Dreaming and the New Way Dreaming village and everything like that. And Jarrod came and sat behind me with his friend. So it was almost like they were energetically holding space for us, these two men. And the other thing that's worth noting is that there weren't many men at Uluru for that happening, that quadruple planetary alignment. Like, I would say it was probably 70-80% women, maybe 20% men, and there were very few single men there. Like, a lot of the men that were there in union with their beloveds, with their partners. So Jarrod was an anomaly. Like, he was an anomaly. Like, there were not many single men at Uluru for that gathering. And I remember looking at both of them and saying, thank you very much for being here. Thank you for hearing the call. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for your presence, because you are representing in physical body all of the men on the planet right now, like, with regards to what's happening. I really wanted to acknowledge the fact that they were there with us. So that stuck with me, A, as a woman, but B, me on my walk, and I felt very alone on my walk. I felt very unsupported on my walk, especially since my awakening at the end of 2012. And I knew what I was holding, and I knew why I was there. And a lot of the women knew why they were there. But we were very grateful for the men and the brothers that were on the ground there to support us in what was happening. And even that that shadowy experience that we had in the evening, like for me metaphysically it was what has been playing out for quite a while on the planet with,
Right.
you know, women being attacked by men, or, you know, not honoring the feminine, not honoring the women that are leading circle or leading gatherings or ceremony.
Patriarchal type.
Yeah, it was just all that old story. But what I also was very aware of was that, you know, Jarrod wasn't quite ready to be standing there with me, you know, and we even had this agreement that he was going to play his didge right after we sang Kinnie, and that didn't happen.
Okay.
And so I was aware that we'd come together, but that just there wasn't quite a readiness for us to be coming together in union, in service. But we
Oh,
knew that we'd been brought together for this incredibly powerful, important, significant
did you?
gathering and
So
constellation.
when you two left Uluru, did you feel that you'd be reconnecting
Well,
and continuing?
So Jarrod had invited me at some point to go hang out in South Australia. I'd had a lot of invites around Australia to just go, you know, hang out with some of the people we'd met. And I was very discombobulated after Uluru.
Mm,
And it was probably the most ungrounded I've ever felt in Australia. I wasn't even sure whether I was going to stay in the country because I was receiving a lot of attacks from people because of what we'd been doing at Uluru. So I wasn't even sure whether I wanted to stay in the country. But what I did do when I finally kind of made my way back to the East Coast, which is, you know, my home. At the time, I was even too frightened to come back to the Byron Shire because one of the women that had been attacking me was living here. But I felt very strongly to send Jarrod some voice messages and just thank him for showing up, and just thank him for his presence, and apologize to him for not passing the talking stick immediately to him after we sang Kanini so that he could play Didge, because that was just what I felt. And then he sent me some voice messages apologizing for not being more supportive. That was our first
did
interaction even
you did
after
you
Uluru.
did you go have a visit with him?
No,
Oh, you
no,
didn't.
no.
He
No,
just
it
invited
was.
you. You didn't go. Okay.
Yeah, so I was visiting very special places in South Australia, other Grid Point 44, and you know, Katharine works with Grid Lines, so it was like I'd love to take her on an adventure into the desert and share that experience with her, but it just never aligned. But you know, to get to it, I was invited to sit with some elders in the Hunter Valley, which is like central New South Wales,
Mm.
for New Year's
21.
2021.
Yeah.
And so I had a relationship. I had a partner in Adelaide, and I come over to the East Coast to sit with elders with all intention to be returning to Adelaide, South Australia. And as soon as I finished the sitting with elders for 5 days, my whole world just literally just changed. Like my relationship just fell apart. There was a massive disconnect, and my guidance was to continue on up to Queensland, where my mum and dad lived. So I was being guided by spirit, and it just so happened I arrived in the Byron Shire, where we are now, on this day, exactly a year from when I first met Katharine. So we're in this real
God.
It wasn't
cyclic.
planned.
No. So today's
Wow.
our anniversary of meeting up, as well as the first contact anniversary. So
Yeah.
This
It's
is
crazy.
crazy.
crazy, right?
Yeah.
So you met a year after
Yeah.
Yeah.
to the
We
day, and then
reunited.
you're here
Yeah.
another, and then
Yeah.
we're here with you
Yeah.
Yeah.
on
And
the year. We're 2 years, and then from the day, and then 1 year
yeah.
from. Okay.
Yeah. And the last time I spoke to you, Todd, was the Saturn Jupiter conjunction on the 21st of December. And that was when I sang Kanini and told you about Kanini.
That
Like,
was in 2020. I mean,
yeah, that was the 21st of December,
2020. Yeah, I was
2020.
going to say that didn't happen in December, did it? Because I know my
No, no,
memory is bad. It
no,
can't be that bad.
no. But
Yeah,
I
I
was
remember that.
Yeah, I did invite Jarrod up here a few times, maybe 2 or 3 times last year, but not last year, the year before, but lockdown. And I mean, at one point he was in Queensland, but the borders were shut, and I live very close to the border. And he was like, maybe I can swim across, or maybe
Absolutely.
Swim across, and there's a river here. Just swim across and have some lunch. But it just wasn't meant to be.
it
And like
wasn't.
from when we left Uluru that whole year, yeah, it was the most, well, we say that each year, it was the most expansive year. Like 2020 for me was like really stepping into my abilities. I didn't even know what Kinnie was about. I had so much growth, like Katharine said. I was still very much just early stages of remembering that plan, what I'm a part of with Katharine in service
Wow.
to. So, yeah, of course, I had a whole year to grow and
Prepare.
remember. And now we've been journeying together. I've been brought up to speed real quick because this one's just like, you
Prepare.
know,
Prepare.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like, keep up or,
Step aside.
step aside. She's on a mission. And, that deep knowing, even when the wheels fall off between us, there is still that just, pulls me back. And, as much as my scared little boy wants to just run for the hills, it's always pulled back into alignment with this principle, this Kinnie principle, and in service to Uncle Bob Randall and Auntie Barb. So yeah, we share a lot, and yeah, it's just starting to take shape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it seems like as time goes on, not just for couples or individuals, like it just seems like that the free will of the human, that let's say the actions, the thoughts, words, and actions from the wounded uh, human and the expression of that free will cannot ignore the divine will or
Yeah.
Yeah.
the divine purposes that are occurring, even if you want to block something out, be it
Yep.
a person or a calling or whatever, you can't do it.
Yep.
It's
And
just
this is the 55 frequency, Todd. It's the 55 master frequency. It's the dance between free will and our own sovereignty as a separate sovereign physical human, which is the one frequency. So it's the 55/1. 5 plus 5 is 10. 1 plus 0 is 1. So the 1 is our sovereign individual free will. And then there's the 55, which is connected to that divine flow,
yeah,
that, and that's the slipstream. And it's funny actually, because last year we were watching this incredible TV show called Loki on Disney Plus, and anyone that wants to understand this more, or understand the 55 frequency, watch 6 episodes of the Marvel comic universe series of Loki, because it really demonstrates, it talks about this sacred timeline, or and these people that are trying to keep people on the sacred timeline, but you're actually noticing that love finds another way.
Mm.
And even people that are trying to kind of like influence that timeline from an egoic place, kind of will be brought into alignment, so to speak. And numerologically, Jarrod's a 33 life path and I'm a 22. So when you bring our life paths together, our relationship blueprint, our joint life path is a 55. So we've been just getting fully schooled in that frequency, especially in the last 12 months, but ever since we, kind of met at Uluru. In the first year, we were just friends. As soon as I knew who he was at a soul level numerologically, and I knew he was a 33 life path, he's a master number life path, I was checking in on him. And I don't tend to reach out to people that often, but given that he's a special human and he showed up at Uluru, I was like, he's in a van, he's by himself, like I'm just gonna keep checking in on him and make sure he's okay.
And he's got
And then
nice eyes and he's hot. That's probably what you
well,
were thinking too.
but in all honesty,
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
but in all honesty, I was still letting go of a previous partner that I
Yeah.
thought was the one.
Okay.
I thought was my beloved, I thought was my twin flame. So, I was kind of on my own journey of, there was a lot of multi-dimensional, interdimensional stuff going on with him. So, and I spent the first 6 months of last year really struggling with what was starting to happen and unfold between the two of us because of my previous relationship,
Right.
and the journey that we'd been on. And when I finally got to kind of June solstice, my ego had been smashed enough, and I think had enough proof to know that, Jarrod and I were meant to be journeying together, especially with how the auspiciousness of how we'd met. And then the last 6 months of last year, Jarrod's ego was getting kind of smashed and schooled.
Yeah, so with that free will, I believed, like Katharine, there was this deep entrenched vision and version of a life that she'd invested in, and the ego needed to be smashed to let go of that. So I was sort of facilitating that for the first 6 months, holding space for that death. And the roles reversed this time. I was in preparation to be working with plants, like plant medicine. Everything I was working towards was to facilitate in that space. Very shamanic, and journeying with Katharine, there's just been this shift in timeline. Like it was, I was given a choice to call forth the energies of a past life that I had as an Indigenous man on this planet, working with the energies of this country, and I just was like, I want to be in service to this country. So I just said yes. And when I said yes, I didn't realize that I actually said no to the timeline that I was following, which was to go study medicine and be in that space and service in that space. So I've been, for the last 3 months, just dying, letting go of that identity, that who I thought, the ego thought was who I was. So as I've been letting go of these plant allies and clearing out all the stuff, I've just been going through layer and layer and layer of death, to accept this new timeline. So it's like, just like the the 3D sort of template of the two worlds splitting, and one's going this way and one's going that way. My timeline, like this rubber band effect, it was easy while it was first splitting, but as it gets wider and wider, it was just met with more and more resistance. And I just had to die. I just had to let all that go. I buried all my medicine. I buried my medicine drum. I buried that whole version of myself, but it still took 3 months for all those personality traits of even
But
the
those are, I mean, those are not like, I mean, that 3 months to me, that sounds like you did great
Quick.
work, because
Yeah.
I
those
do
are,
move quick.
Yeah.
yeah, but I mean,
uh,
that's a, because, I think that's one of the things that you notice it. I mean, it could probably be said about myself too. I don't know, but you notice the attachment, the identity attachments that occurred, let's say, from awakening or post awakening, that people are having to let go of. And that sounds like what you did. Like you actually had to let go of those identities that pulled you out of the 3D basically and brought you into the new paradigm, and then you have to get rid of those, which
yeah,
was which is, I think, energetically, like, from like a sequence or a pattern. I think a lot of people can identify with that in 2021. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
That's good.
And I kind of knew, I have a lot of foresight, and I'm, like, yeah, I get shown a lot, and I get shown a lot of, future timelines, potential timelines. And so I was just doing my best to kind of love him unconditionally, and just hold space, because I mean, I was shown a lot right at the beginning, even this time last year, even when my human was suffering and struggling and I wasn't very well. My higher self was showing me a lot connected to, future and potential timelines for the two of us. So um, yeah, it's been interesting just to do my best to, hold space for the death, um not be held back myself. And I spoke to some beautiful women in my life who were in committed relationships and who'd been through similar experiences with their partners, so they were giving me some really good guidance and advice, because it was a bit tricky, but for me, luckily, the Gregorian calendrical portal that we refer to as New Year's Eve, proved to be a very, very helpful, supportive portal. We watched Loki again, binge watched it, and somehow, Jarrod's human decided that he was just going to let everything that was dense and heavy and had been holding us back, just let that be in 2021, and just move forwards into and embrace the new energies and frequencies of 2022. And been nice because it was
But this is where I come back to, like, the timing of things. Like I've always said, there's just this organic unfolding of things. Like, if I would have forced myself to go into these and let go of all these things, like, that was just creating more suffering, more damage. Like, I wasn't in avoidance to any of it, but I just knew that there was like the date, a simple change of frequency, and it was like, it just happened, Todd. It was just like as I thought it would,
Yeah.
I mean, I know we're not in the linear realm anymore, but timing is essential.
Yep.
I mean, it's just, sometimes it's the right time and sometimes it's just not, it's not time yet.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
So you literally just came out the other side as an individual, as a couple.
Yeah.
I mean, that 3-month period, did you, Katharine, did you have conversations about this? I think a lot of people struggle with trying to understand these couples, and do they actually talk to each other the way we talk to each other? I mean, is it, you hear people say everything is in the open. Well, I can see that, but at the same time, there's often things we don't even know about. So how can they be in the open? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like you're very fresh, like the fire's still near you. The fire, you just left the fire kind of thing.
Yeah.
And this is only the 11th. So these 11 days in 2022 must have been really special for you both.
Yeah. Yeah, they have. Yeah. For me, I knew what was happening. I knew what was playing out. And there's a lot of mirroring that happens in our relationship, because, again, numerologically, we're an 11 expression. Jarrod's an 8 expression. I'm a 3. So when the 8 and the 3 come together, we're an 11. So, I mean, we've been joking about it a lot, but the first 6 months of last year, Jarrod was just holding space for me and my ego and the deaths that I was going through. And I mean, we joked about it kind of at the time, but I mean, he was laughing most days at me, bless him, not in a mean way, but just I was dying every single day. It was a constant source of amusement for Jarrod.
Katharine was like, I was poking and prodding. It's what I did. It was my way of, my guidance was to get this happening, because Katharine wasn't, willing to look at certain shadow aspects. And, I don't know why, but there just was this timing that had to happen. And, we ended up at the halfway point, and it was literally like,
pass the baton over.
Now let's see how you handle it. But Katharine's more gentle, and what I've learned from being with Katharine is compassion. And it's interesting because the last 6 months I've been getting schooled in compassion and how to be sensitive, because I was completely disconnected from my sensitivities towards people. I was a concreter. I didn't grow up around, I never worked with women. It was always just men, burly men. So I was getting schooled in that. And it's interesting because the last part of, my darkest days was actually learning to be compassionate with myself. And there's actually a new modality that has come through from compassion. I've seen how healing compassion and affirmation is. So I'm using this now in my sessions. I've already back to work now and started using this more gentle, softer, subtle way of healing. So,
well, it's interesting. It's interesting how one of you pushed and prod, and the other one kind of remained quiet. Right.
Well, you know, for me, obviously, I'm in a female body in this lifetime, and so I know that my role is to be embodying that softness and that gentleness and that the unconditional love of the feminine, so to speak. But at the same time, there were times when I needed to be firm with him.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I think the biggest thing for me, I was coming to the end of a 9 personal year, and the 9 is all about endings and closure and death. um, and we were in an 8 universal month, and in the shadow of the 8 is violence and abuse and things like that. And that was a story and a shadow that had kind of followed me throughout my life and plagued me, and even, you know, kind of throughout my childhood. And so, you know, for me, the dance really was between just honoring him as a sovereign being, honoring his walk and his sovereign choices, and not trying to push or force him to do anything or go anywhere or be anyone that he didn't want to be or didn't want to do. Being as unconditionally loving and kind and caring and gentle and compassionate as I could, but also not taking any shit. You know, it was like, it's 100% okay for you to be upset, for you to be angry, for you to be rageful, for you to be frustrated. Just don't fire any of it at me. Don't
Mm-hmm.
project any of it at me. That's not okay. Um, but use your words. Let me know if there's anything I can do. If you want to just be by yourself, that's fine. So, you know, in a weird way, like
And
the
this is
inner
all
child.
living in the van. This is
No,
all
this was living in a house. We were
okay.
living in a house for about a month or so in a
Okay.
place called Rosebank, and
Okay.
we were living with another beautiful soul sister, and we all had this beautiful journey together. But you know, I think when we're in a relationship, you know, there's a lot of stuff that can come up from our childhood. You know, the woman can become the mother, the man can become the father. I knew what was playing out. I knew that his inner child and his inner teenager was, and he acknowledged it as well, you know. But I also knew that I was kind of being prepared for motherhood in a weird way. It's just like, you know, he's a fully grown man in his own right, but when we're triggered or when we're in our pain body, sometimes we'll regress if there are things that, you know, were not dealt with when we were younger. And we've just come across this incredible, well, I've known about it for a while, but the weekend came across this amazing modality called holographic kinetics, which is connected. It's also referred to as dream time healing. And one of the really powerful things about this modality, which Jarrod might kind of train in, is it acknowledges when people are stuck in time, moments of time, either in this lifetime or previous lifetime, and can move and shift people out of it very, very quickly. In the same way that you can do with timeline therapy through NLP or through hypnotism, but there's other big magic involved because it's connected to the original Indigenous people of this land, Australia. But I knew that from a constellation perspective, I was showing up as the mother in the house. And
Mm-hmm.
he was going through, you know, a little boy teenage rebellion phase. And so no amount of me being rough or harsh with him was going to, you know, change anything. The biggest healing or shift that happened between us that I was very conscious of was about Jarrod being heard. He really needed to be heard. And it was something that he didn't always have from his mum. She couldn't always be present with him. I knew that, you know, in order to move past this and shift it in a big way, and numerology helps as well, because the 33 life path, the 3 is about speaking and being heard, and the 33 is like the master frequency of that. And I have a lot of patience. I'm generally a very, very peaceful, calm, gentle human. I'm very sensitive myself. So I knew that I could hold that space for him, but I also knew that I needed to be in my power and have some very strong boundaries if things were starting to spill over, you know. So that was the way that I navigated it. And even just the other day, you were thanking me for just the way
Yeah,
that I
but this
navigated
is
it.
this is where the power is in communication. Like, I generally take total responsibility for myself instantly. Like, I'm very aware of my shadow, and as soon as it comes up, I own it, and you know, I sort of can humble myself, and we move through things very quick because of that awareness. But yeah, the last 2 months, like when I was in separation, like there was no awareness. Like it was literally like I was so unconscious, so not in a place to even look at this shadow. And yeah, the way that it was healed was through understanding, compassion, and someone who tuned in and knew that I needed to be listened to. I needed my space. I didn't need to be forced. I didn't need to be pushed. So, it was a very, very powerful shift. And I've learned from the way that I was treated that is such a powerful way to, and now I'm more loving and compassionate whenever anything comes up for Katharine, instead of being like, oh, I used to say, oh, your stuff's coming up, good, we can move through it, very insensitive. So now I'm loving and compassionate and can hold her when her stuff comes up from a gentle space. And it's beautiful to
I
journey with
think that
someone
I think
awareness.
that there was a lot of that witnessed last year in the community. The frequency of, I know what I'm looking at. I can see this and I can see that in these people, and you just need to do this and you'll get through it. And then watching that whole year where people were, I mentioned this earlier when you were talking about, but yeah, as the year goes on, then you kind of see everything gets flipped, and there's a lot of humble pie being served, which I think was a very good sign for the community, that people came off of their high horse, basically. And we've all been there, because how can you not be there when you get these massive downloads that, make you feel really special? I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that people have had to deal with. But yeah, that's a really great explanation of this process that you went through from both standpoints. I just had one question about that too for Jarrod. Were you conscious during that 2 months? Because you mentioned 2 months for this particular part. Were you conscious of your unconsciousness?
Of course.
You were
Totally,
at the time. So you were
totally conscious of
conscious of your unconsciousness,
Yeah.
yeah.
which
And
probably, go ahead.
yeah, I was just going to say, totally conscious of my unconsciousness
Okay.
and totally okay with it.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
was total
Yeah.
acceptance. It was
That's that
powerful.
compassion. That's that compassion in embodied, right?
Yeah,
Like, no judgment, no judgment, no judgment. I'm not going to judge myself. I mean, this is, yeah,
total acceptance. It was
two great
exactly where I
perspectives.
was. Yeah,
So some people have mentioned that today is a 369 day. Do you know anything about that, Katharine?
for
Or
the planet, it's
What's the date? A 369 day.
yeah, because
I
it's
the nine.
111 or 11 is a 3. Then you got the 222,
Yeah.
which is a 6, and then you add them together, it's a 9.
Yes, in that way, yes. It's a 9, yeah, it's a 9 universal day today. Yeah,
Mm.
and we are in a what we're in what's the month though? We're in a 7 universal month in a 6 universal year. So
976.
yeah, 976. That's the way that I would interpret it. But either way, it's a 9 universal day, and the 9 is all about the 9's about compassion.
Yeah.
The 9 is about compassion and unconditional love and Kinnie.
Yeah, the principle.
Yeah.
Kinnie.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
So
When you guys work through this stuff, does it feel like old muscle memory? Is there any familiarity with it, like in collaborating together, or even within yourself? Does it feel like a path that you're familiar with in some way?
For me, it feels like an agreement. It feels like, the way that we came together at Uluru, even though our humans weren't fully ready for it. I mean, I was as prepared. I knew I'd been being prepared for that moment for the previous 9 years that I'd spent in Australia. But it felt like, and I always explain everything through my lens and filter of numbers. It's interesting because at a soul level and as humans, we're very different. Like Jarrod has all the numbers in his blueprint that I don't, and vice versa. So, like, really, from a twin flame perspective, we're very, very, very different. And I'm here to mirror to Jarrod what he's, you know, what he isn't so strong in, and vice versa. But when you bring our numbers together, we've got lots of ones in our blueprint. So we're a 55-1 life path, we're an 11 expression, we're a 1 heart's desire and soul's urge, a 1 personality, and a 66 soul's purpose. And the 1 is all about the new. It's the frequency of the new earth. The 1 frequency is sovereignty, and free will. But the 11 frequency are the relationships of the new earth, where you hold your sovereignty as separate, whole and complete beings. But then when you come together, that's where the magic happens. So it feels like at a soul level, and I think this is where the integration has been quite challenging for us as separate humans and separate souls, but a little bit easier for me because I hold a 1 and an 11 in my blueprint. So I actually feel very at home and at ease being in the relationship, because those numbers that are created by our souls coming together in collaboration are more familiar to my human and my soul, whereas it's been a bit more of an integration for Jarrod, because we're here to anchor a lot of new things, a lot of new ways, a lot of just a lot to do with the new earth, which is unprecedented, which again, I know everyone watching and everyone who's part of the Soulogy family will know, like there are so many of us that are here to plant seeds and lead the way and way show and guide and take us into a way of being that has never been experienced on earth before.
Right on. Yeah. Jarrod, what do you love most about Katharine?
I just love how every day it's informative. It's like I've got this walking Wikipedia internet source with me. It's like the Akashic Records is in my van. It's something I don't know. We just have a conversation about it, and I'm brought up to speed really quick. And yeah, I love how much she shows me and brings the best out in me. And she's my biggest fan. She's my biggest cheerleader. Like I wouldn't have had my business launched back in August, and just helping me along the way to use these powerful portal days to take action and help me to grow and expand. Yeah, it's been great. Like, yeah, it's been tough, but I'm also, I signed up for this. I take total responsibility for myself. I love this, and I know it's for something great. We're moving in the direction of our wishes and dreams, and we're getting closer and closer. And on the other side of every, contracted moment, we expand even greater. So I love this journey, even in the moments that aren't so fun. There's always gold to be found in it, and that's
What do you mean? What moments aren't fun? I never heard of that.
yeah.
It's all sunshine, rainbows,
Yeah,
unicorns.
Of course.
Cupcakes.
What about you, Katharine?
Ego completely destroyed is fun. Yeah.
What did you say, Todd?
What about you? About Jarrod?
What do I love most about Jarrod?
Mm-hmm. I'm just curious.
So many things. I love what an amazing cook he is. Like he is like, I've always wanted to be with a guy who can cook really well, and is very creative and quite inventive in the kitchen. And because I love to cook and I love to co-create meals, like we haven't even really got going yet. We're always talking about the meals we want to make and the things we want to play with and the things we want to experiment. But like this guy, he loves food so much. Like it brings him so much joy, almost more joy than it brings me, which again makes sense given his numbers. But for me, and again, like as a woman, like looking at a human who I'll potentially be bringing other humans to the planet with, it's like meal times and sharing food, and for me they're very special sacred times. And just being in a relationship with someone who loves food and is as creative and experimental as Jarrod is wonderful. I love his fearlessness. It kind of scared me a bit to begin with. Like I was always talking to him about his resting chief face. Like sometimes I'd look at him and he'd be looking quite serious and severe, like maybe he'd want to kill me, but it'd be all peace and calm on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
But he's fierce as, like, again, numerologically, he's got 2 8s in his blueprint. He's an 8 expression and an 8 personality. And like, it's been, I don't know if I've ever met a man who is as fearless as Jarrod is when it comes to the shadow. Like, he has, which is obviously why he does what he does and why he can help people in the way that he helps people. Like, his numbers are very much comfortable in the dark and the shadow, and my numbers are very, very comfortable in the light. And so of course we've come together in that way. But you know, I actually, it makes me feel very safe, knowing how comfortable he is in the shadow, with his own shadow, and just what little he doesn't really have any resistance to anything. And if something generally shadowy is, you know, where there's conflict or there's, you know, something that's uncomfortable, he'll lean in.
Mm-hmm.
He'll move towards it. Whereas I used to run away or move away. Whereas he's kind of shown me that it's safe to move towards the shadow. It's safe to lean into that space. And he can create a very safe space for that.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
I love, is very important. And I also love, well, I could sit here for hours, but I also love, you know, how he understands and sees everything metaphysically. He's not completely 3D. And so it's really fun to be in a relationship with someone who has that multidimensional metaphysical understanding that everything's connected, everything's energy. And if something's happening, it's like, okay, why is this happening? And then how can we change it? Or what choices and decisions do we need to make to affect our reality and create a new timeline or collapse? You know, he was always talking about not wanting to create new karma. And he's like, it's okay if this is coming up. Let's deal with it. Let's face it. And let's collapse that timeline so that we're free of that karma. And I love that as well. It was like, it's awesome.
Far out. I can't wait to get together with you again later in 2022 to see how the physicalization of the third energy is occurring. I'm just saying that because you mentioned something a minute ago about bringing other beings into this world.
Yeah.
So I guess you have more preparation to do in regard to that, even after just going through the preparation that you did in 2021.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you guys coming on, and it's good seeing y'all again.
Yeah.
And I appreciate the work that you're doing, the commitment, because you know that it's not just for y'all. I mean, it's for everybody. I mean, it's a fact. So thank you for being so open too.
Yeah, our pleasure. Thanks for the invite, Todd. Thanks to both you and Morgan for inviting us to chat with you. We love and appreciate you both so much, and your service, and, you know, your service to the Soulogy family, and, you know, beyond. So grateful.
And everyone out there who's doing the same, leading the way.
Yeah.
Thanks to everyone.
Yeah.
Share the love.
Yeah. We're all in it together. We're in it now. No turning back.
Yeah.
No separation.
Yeah.
That's right. I'll see y'all. Take care.
Yeah.